that.
750,000 jobs lost this year. Our financial system in turmoil. And John McCain, erratic in the crisis, out of touch on the economy. No wonder his campaign wants to change the subject, turn the page on the financial crisis by launching dishonest, dishonorable assaults against Barack Obama. Struggling families can't turn the page on this economy, and we can't afford another president who's this out of touch.
I'm Barack Obama, and I
said the point of all of this, we are looking forward to turning the page on this financial crisis, getting back to discussing Mr. Obama personally. Turning the page on this financial crisis?
Diane, I actually listened in on that conference call. I don't make all of
Just a little over a month ago, John McCain was running even with, in some polls even slightly ahead of, Barack Obama. But then two apparently game-changing things occurred. McCain chose Governor Sarah Palin as his running mate, which according to the polls isn't working out that well. And in response to the deepening financial crisis, McCain tried a Hail Mary tactic of rushing back to Washington to demonstrate leadership, which didn't work out at all. Now with the financial crisis deepening, at midday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down more than 550 points. And with polls showing a further shift toward the Democrats because of this crisis, McCain is trying something else, as outlined publicly on Saturday by one of his advisors, Greg Strimple. Strimple told the Washington Post, quote, "We are looking forward to turning a page on this financial crisis and getting back to discussing Mr. Obama's aggressively liberal record and how he will be too risky for Americans." And sure enough, Governor Palin has fallen to the task with a will in attempting to raise grave doubts about Senator Obama's character.
Now, it turns out one of his earliest supporters is a man named Bill Ayers. And according to the New York Times, he was a domestic terrorist and part of a group that, quote, launched a campaign of bombings that would target the...
Why do William Ayers and the Reverend Jeremiah Wright matter? The answer, we are told, has to do with Barack Obama's judgment and character. Judgment in choosing to associate with them, judgment in choosing to serve on a board with Ayers, character in choosing not to walk out on Wright's rhetoric. In our fourth story, what we learn applying this litmus test to John McCain. We told you last night about the U.S. Council for World Freedom, on whose board McCain sat for years. But while Ayers was a rehabilitated terrorist when Obama served on a board with him, what about McCain's fellow board members in the 80s? What about fellow board member Anthony Buscarin, veteran of the Pioneer Fund, a eugenics group researching white superiority, or fellow board member Jay Parker, a registered foreign agent for the apartheid government of South Africa in the late 70s. And if board co-membership is so toxic, what about McCain's list of endorsements today, including Leonore Annenberg, widow of philanthropist Walter Annenberg, who created the project on which both Ayers and Obama served? And what of Obama attending sermons by the Reverend Jeremiah Wright? Never mind the fact that the teams of opposition researchers have yet to produce any evidence that Obama witnessed any of Wright's critiques of America. If that tells us anything, what does August 30th, 1993 tell us? On that day, McCain attended a fundraiser for the Oregon Citizens Alliance. He can't claim he wasn't warned. Going in, 30 protesters picketed him for endorsing the anti-gay group. Prior to McCain's appearance there, a Republican senator, a colleague of his, Mark Hatfield, warned Senator McCain not to do it. McCain's own staffers called it the invitation from hell, the Oregonian newspaper reported. An Arizona newspaper column previewed the speech with this headline, quote, "Hate group finds friend in McCain." And yet McCain went, sat silently, offered no rebuke during or after the remarks by this woman, Marilyn Shannon, who praised a local woman who had just shot a doctor less than 2 weeks earlier. A doctor who was a former Navy flight surgeon, a sonogram pioneer, was shot in both arms because he performed legal abortions. Unlike Ayers, who did not endorse terrorist activities during his meetings with Obama, this woman, Shannon, said of the shooter as McCain sat there, quote, "She's a fine lady." A judge who later sentenced this fine lady for a campaign of, yes, bombing women's clinics said, quote, "Though I am loath to call anyone a terrorist, you are a terrorist." And Marilyn Shannon, who defended that terrorist, who later said her praise did not mean she approves of others doing what that terrorist did, as McCain renounced her even. She was a Bush delegate in 2004, seen here with a Purple Heart bandage, mocking American combat veteran John Kerry. This year, last month, She was a delegate for John McCain. Judgment and character.
So the McCain camp is playing the association game for all it is worth, whatever it's worth. But inspecting the other guy's pals is a double-edged moose hunting sword. If your vice presidential nominee has spent years palling around with fringe Alaskans who are pushing to secede from the United States. According to a brand new story on Salon.com, Sarah Palin's ties to the fringe Alaska Independence Party are deeper than previously reported. Want to know what the party's founder, Joe Vogler, was all about? Try these quotes. Quote, "I'm an Alaskan, not an American. I've got no use for America or her damned institutions." That's one from the party's website. From a 1991 interview, quote, "The fires of hell are frozen glaciers compared to my hatred for the American government. Wow. And I won't be buried under their damn flag." Now, in the same way Barack Obama was not a member of the Weather Underground, Sarah Palin was never a member of the Alaska Independence Party. However, non-member Palin has attended party conventions, has addressed the convention as recently as this year in 2008, saying, quote, "Keep up the good work." Does that constitute palling around? Is there more to this story? Joining us now is Max Blumenthal, a fellow at the Nation Institute. He has just reported and written a brand new story about Palin's connections to the Alaska Independence Party for Salon.com. Max, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here.
For people unfamiliar with Alaska politics, what's the Alaska Independence Party all about? Is there anything in the politics of the lower 48 to compare them to?
There is. In the lower 48, there's a neo-Confederate secessionist movement that reveres the Confederacy, the lost cause, and they are intimately linked with the Alaskan Independence Party. So is the Constitution Party, a theocratic party that wants to put the United States under the control of biblical law. The Alaskan Independence Party, since it was founded by Joe Vogler, has been a haven for anti-government extremists, anti-government militia members, and conspiratorial figures who believe that the United States government plans to implement a new world order. And when my co-author, the co-author of this article, David Nywert, an investigative journalist who's been covering the anti-government militia movement since the 90s, when we took our separate trips to Alaska, when we interviewed the former head of the Alaskan Independence Party, Mark Christen, when we talked to the people who served on the city council with Sarah Palin, and talked to different people around the city of Wasilla, what we found is that Sarah Palin is far more intimately associated with the extreme right-wing fringe of Alaska than the media has acknowledged or than she is willing to acknowledge.
Well, how strong are those connections, and how are they made manifest? I mean, I know that she was close with that former chair of the party who you interviewed when she first got into politics, but what are the exact connections between her and this group?
Well, she used the former head of the Alaskan Independence Party, Mark Christen, and his friend, a John Birch Society activist named Stephen Stoll, to advance her political career. And then once she was elected mayor and then governor, she used her position to advance their agenda on a local and state level, and she sought to reward them with plum political appointments. For example, the guy I just mentioned, Stephen Stoll, he's known around Wasilla as Black Helicopter Steve. That's because there's a rumor that he had taken several high-powered automatic weapons and wrapped them in plastic and buried them in his front yard in expectation of the federal government bringing on the New World Order. He wanted to be ready. These characters used to hold regular protests outside the office of Sarah Palin's predecessor, John Stein, and when she declared her campaign against him, at their urging, they demanded that he produce a marriage certificate proving that he was legally married to his wife. So they were creating the negative backscatter in Sarah Palin's mayoral campaign. Steve Stoll donated $1,000 to Sarah Palin's mayoral campaign, and as soon as she became mayor, she sought to appoint Steve Stoll to the city council seat that she had just vacated. This appointment was blocked by a city council member me and David Nywert interviewed named Nick Carney because he considered Steve Stoll a, quote, violent influence. John Stein, the former mayor, said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that Steve Stoll is the kind of guy who, if he disagreed with you, would take you out in the parking lot and beat you up. People around Wasilla consider this character a menacing and extreme figure, but Sarah Palin sought to appoint him to city council.
Max Blumenthal, fellow at the Nation Institute, contributor to Salon.com. We'd advise our listeners or our viewers who are interested in checking out more about this to check out Max's very detailed article at Salon.com about these associations today. Thanks, Max. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.